Adept Cosmetics has a new launch, the Emo Palette, and I'm so excited to share all the details with you. I'm going to be doing some swatches, 2 looks, and then at the end, I'll give you my thoughts. For the swatches, I do them super detailed and just give you objective, factual descriptions. For the looks, I like to talk you through how things apply, as well as just things that I notice about the eyeshadows, and that does tend to bring in some of my preferences, but then at the end, that's when I get more subjective and I really give you my thoughts and opinions on the palette. Also, hi, in case you're new, my name is Noopur and I love indie makeup and all things color and sparkle, and welcome to my channel. I would really love it if you would give this video a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already subscribed, especially if you love indie makeup, because I do a lot of indie makeup in my content. This is my first time trying Adept actually, so I would love for you to comment down below if you have tried Adept before. What is your favorite palette from them? Because since I'm totally new to the brand, I'm curious what the fan favorites are. Let me give you some launch details really quickly. So this palette is launching on March 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and I also want to note that I did receive this palette in PR, so I just want to make that clear, but I will try to be as, fair and objective as possible while covering this palette. I think that's all I have to say, so let's get into the close-ups and swatches. Here's the packaging. It's a hard plastic case with magnetic closure. I like how sturdy this feels without being too heavy. Then here's the inside. There are 6 mattes and 9 shimmers. The palette is magnetic, so you can take out the pans and even swap them for other Adept shades. Here are all the mattes. There are 3 lighter shades and 3 darker shades. These are a bit thinner and on the sheer side. They took a few layers to build to this pigment level. Really quickly, in case you're new to my channel, the way that I do my swatches is I do an opaque swatch at the top and a sheer swatch at the bottom. And then when I'm rotating my hand like this, I do first an in-focus shot and then an out-of-focus shot, just so you can get multiple different views of the eyeshadow. Whisper has a transparent base with mostly white silver sparkles, but also a tiny amount of minuscule gold sparkles. It does not shift, but it is very sparkly. It has a medium particle size and shears out well for a scattered diamond-like twinkle. It feels a little textured in the pan, but isn't flaky. It would benefit from a tacky base if you want it fully opaque. Allure has a semi-sheer lime green base with sparkles that shift from pink to yellow to green, but there are also a ton of yellow sparkles mixed in, so it has a very dimensional finish. The shadow has a medium-small particle size and smooths out really well. It is super reflective and super sparkly. Seafoam has a very sheer pale mint green base with sparkles that shift from a soft pink to green, but there's also a ton of silver to the shadow that kind of mutes the shifts because it takes over. This one has some texture and was a little difficult to build in an even layer. I recommend glitter glue with this one. Coal Dust has an opaque, deep navy base with a ton of multicolored sparkles. I see mostly red and gold, but also tiny pinpricks of other colors. This is not holographic, even though it kind of appears to be. It has a small particle size and smooths out easily. The navy base is more of a satin, and the multicolored specks are what bring the intense sparkle. MC1 is one of 2 holochromes in this palette. It has a pigmented blue base with sparkles that shift from pink to orange to gold to green. The holo particles melt well into the base. They are visible even when you are not in strong direct light. I think that's because the holo sparkles are a medium particle size, while the multichrome pigments are a small particle size. The shadow is smooth once applied. Dormant has a sheer tan base with a duochrome green to pink shift, but there are also a tiny amount of blue and gold sparkles mixed in for a dimensional finish. This one is super sparkly with a more medium particle size. It smooths out and also shears out really nicely. Another holo is the second holochrome in this palette. It is a black-based multichrome that shifts teal, blue, purple, pink, and even a little orange gold at the sharpest angle. Like the previous holochrome, the holo sparkles are a medium particle size amongst the small particle multichrome, but there are also large holo flakes. The shadow is smooth overall. Gold Rush is more of a standard shimmer with no shifts. It has an opaque warm bronze base and yellow gold sparkles. It is very sparkly and reflective. This one has a bit of texture and weight to it, but it smooths out okay. Backdraft has a pink base with sparkles that shift pink, gold, and green. This one is the most textured shade in the palette with a slightly large particle size, but it is not flaky. Because of this, when you build it up and smooth it out, it becomes more metallic and reflective. Lastly, I wanted to show my static photo swatches for a different look at the shadows and also to see the entire color story together. I'm going to do the looks now, and I'm going to do one look on each eye, and I've never actually done that before on camera, so I mostly just film this eye, and I just want to apologize ahead of time in case the angles and stuff are weird for when I do this eye. I'm going to start with this purple matte over here, and I'm going to be running this through the crease. So I did notice when I was swatching these mattes that they are a bit on the thinner side, so I expected them to be a little bit more sheer going on, which is why I picked up a little bit more pigment in this second dip. but it's building really well, and you know, I'm not having any issues building it. This shade is so interesting because it looks a bit more murky in the pan, but on me, like at least on my skin tone, it comes off a bit more pastel-y, but still muted. By the way, I do have eye primer on. It's the Milani eye primer, which is the one that I use every single time I do my eyeshadow. I'm gonna go into this bluish grayish shade next, and this is gonna go on the outer corner. I'm doing a pretty simple look here because, like I said before, I haven't tried Adept before, so I just want to do simple looks to test out their mattes since I don't really know how they're going to perform. I dipped in another time because the first dip I tapped off a lot of the matte because it looked pretty dark in the pan and I didn't know how pigmented it was going to go on, and since this is such a light shade in the crease, I didn't want there to be like a large disconnect between this deepening shade and the light shade. But because I tapped off a bunch of that, it actually went on a little light, which is good to know that you can, you know, sheer out that matte and lighten it up a lot. And it's blending really well into this like pastel-y purple shade, as well as blending out really well on my primer. Like I don't feel like that looks really heavy smoky. I dipped back in one more time, so this is the third time, and I'm going to build it up again. I was about to run the blue matte on my lower lash line, but then I realized I never put the purple matte on my lower lash line, so I am going to do that right now. Just sweeping it along pretty much the entire lower lash line. This was a bit harder to build up on my lower lash line just because I don't have eye primer down there. I just have my concealer set with powder. So in general, mattes go on a bit less pigmented down there, and since these mattes are on the more sheer side and this is a lighter color, it just took a couple layers to build up. But now I'm going to go in with the blue matte and run that just on the outer portion of my lower lash line. For the shimmers, I really want to try one of the hollows because I've just heard good things about Adept's hollow, so I'm going to go into this one, MC1 in the center. And I'm going to be putting this on most of the lid, but leaving this outer portion blank. This hollow is so creamy, and like not overly emollient creamy, just like it feels very, like it feels like there's not going to be a lot of fallout, which there wasn't, and I'm usually pretty messy putting on my shimmer, so that's a good thing in my book. I picked up some more of that shade on a brush, and I'm just going to get the inner part of my lid and sweep this up towards the crease with the brush. I always like to apply with both my finger and a brush for personal reasons, but also because I like to test whether shimmers pick up well on both, especially because a lot of creamier shimmers can sometimes, like I sometimes have an issue picking them up with a brush, but that wasn't the case here. The shimmer did go on a bit more sheerly with the brush, but that's pretty typical across the board with most brands. So now on this outer portion of my eye, I'm going to use the other hollow shade and do a little blend between the two. So this shadow did not pick up as easily on the brush, and this brush is a bit more slick. I think I'm going to switch to one with a bit more tooth to it. Now that I'm using a different brush, it picked up a lot better, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the outer third of my lid. I did have to build this shadow up in a few layers, and one of the other reasons I wanted to use this hollow, in addition to just like wanting to do like all hollow on this lid, is that this shadow, I mentioned in the swatch portion that it has these like larger hollow flakes, and I did get one on my lid right over here. I don't know if you can see it on camera. Okay, I came in a little closer, so we'll see if you can see it on camera, but it's right over here. I can definitely see this like large flake, which I've never really seen that in hollow shadows before, so I'm not sure if that was like intentional with the shadow or what the deal is. I'm going to finish up with this shade Whisper, and this is going in my inner corner and a little bit down here, and finally up through the inner swoop. I really like how this shade looks when it's sheared out because it has that scattered diamond-like twinkle. It's so beautiful. That's it for this eye, so let's move on to look number 2. I'm going to be starting with this green matte because I plan to use some of the green shimmers. And this is going to go all throughout the crease. I'm sorry if I look at the viewfinder more than often for this eye because, like I said, I'm not familiar with doing this eye on camera, and I just want to make sure that I'm not blocking my eye while I'm applying eyeshadow. So much like that purple matte, this one's a bit on the sheer side, and it's taking a few layers to get up to a pigment level that I enjoy. But I really don't mind that because I am more of a build and blend girly anyway. This time I won't forget to run it on my lower lash line. And once again, like that purple shade, this is going on a bit sheer on my lower lash line. To deepen up, I'm going to go into this brown shade. And I once again tapped off some of it, but not as much as the first time since I saw that these mattes are a bit more sheer, and actually this one has quite a bit of pigment to it. So I'm just going to work with what I have on right now, not dip back in, and just try to blend it out a bit. Green and brown is such a classic combo, especially for spring. It's so earthy and just reminds me of nature and trees. It's perfect. I dip back into that green really quickly, and I'm just going to use it to kind of blend over where these two shades meet and kind of soften that edge a bit. I'm going to go ahead though and run that on my lower lash line. Again, keeping it on this outer third here. The minute I saw this palette, this shade really stood out to me, so I'm going to be using that on my lid. I'm a sucker for shifty shades, for sparkly shades, and for dimensional shades with multicolored sparkles, and this shimmer has it all. So I think, I don't know, should I add another shimmer in the inner portion, or should I just use this all over the lid because it's so special? I decided to keep it a bit more simple since I already have, you know, 3 shimmers on this side, so I think I can just use this one all over the lid for this eye. This shadow did pick up very easily on this brush, which I am very happy about. But this one, as I said, I am messy with my shimmer application, which means I do get fallout, which I don't mind, but I am getting a little bit more fallout from this shade because it's not as creamy as the other shades. This shimmer is just, it's so beautiful. It's like, this look to me is spring, especially because I'm gonna go in with even more green. I'm putting this in my inner corner, mirroring what I did on my other eye, and this shade has a bit of a sheer tan base, but when you apply it with the light hand, I feel like I can get away with it on my inner corner, but I don't know if that would work if you have a lighter skin tone than me. At least, you know, if you don't want like a dark cast in the inner corner. I just spent like 15 seconds looking at this inner corner in my mirror up close, like moving my head in all different directions just to make sure that there was in fact no like brown cast, and at least on my skin tone, this makes a really beautiful inner corner shade. I love, love, love how dimensional this shadow is because it's technically like a duochrome because it just has that pink to green shift, but then it has these additional other multicolored sparkles in it that make it so special. Here are the final looks with mascara and lips on. I just did kind of a My Lips But Better gloss because I have 2 different looks on each eye, and I don't prefer to do that, but I just did not have time to do 2 full looks and also get this video up before launch, so please forgive me for that. And per usual, here are the looks up close and in my studio light so that you can see all of the sparkle and stuff. I always like to show it in this light because it just gives a slightly different, you know, effect, and I feel like this light is closer to what the sun, like direct sunlight shows, and so I think it's really nice for that. And yeah, these shadows are so sparkly and beautiful. I see why people really love Adept shimmers. So before we get into my thoughts, I want to start by reiterating that this is not a review because I have to use this palette a lot more. And also, this is my first time trying Adept, so I'm still learning what their formulas are like, but I do have, you know, plenty of expertise trying out so many other different brands and types of eyeshadow formulas, so when I'm assessing things, that's what I'm relying on. First, I want to talk about the theme because this is supposed to be an emo palette, but I don't know if I quite get that from this palette because it's close, you know, you have the black and even this blue and the purple, even the pink to some degree, but then you have this gold and all the greens, and that kind of, it throws me off a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I love this color story. I really, really, really love this color story, and that's what drew me into this palette in the first place. All these tones are right up my alley and things that I would wear day to day. But as far as being an emo palette, I don't quite know if it hits the mark. Next, let's talk about the mattes because I said in the tutorial portion that they are on the more thin and sheer side. And I want to clarify that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes I do want a sheer matte, especially in my more simple day-to-day, like more wearable looks. I actually do prefer a sheer matte because it's faster, and I don't know, I think a lot of times I have trouble blending out super pigmented mattes if I want them to be in a sheer layer, so sometimes I do want a sheer formula. That being said, I prefer to use a sheer formula of mattes with equally sheer shimmers, which this palette does have a good amount of sheer shimmers. You know, you have this green one over here, even this green one here, over here as well. There are several sheer shimmers in this palette, but some of them are pretty dark and opaque, like this one, and those are not shades that I would use with sheer mattes. But again, you do have some darker shades in this palette, which, you know, this shade did build up pretty well, and so did this one. It went on a little light because I went in light-handed, but I was able to build it up to like this pigment level just fine. I do want to take a minute to talk about this black matte because I am always saying that I don't like black mattes in my palette, but I think that it makes perfect sense in an emo palette. You have to have a black matte in an emo palette, so I'm very much not upset about the fact that there's a black matte in here. It really fits the theme. That being said, this matte is a bit on the softer side. Like, I don't feel like it's a true pigmented, super dark black matte. It feels like a soft black, and it should have been a dark pigmented black matte to go with the emo theme. Next, I want to talk about the shimmers because this is what I was most excited for with Adept. Even though I've never tried them, so many of my friends and mutuals over on Instagram love Adept, and I've tried many of their palettes, so I feel like through the grapevine, I've just heard such wonderful things about their shimmers, and I can see why everyone goes nuts over them. All of these are so sparkly and reflective, and there's a lot of shifty shades, and even this gold shimmer over here, it's not shifty, but it's still so sparkly, and that's what I prefer with standard shimmers. And I do enjoy that even though that this is a standard shimmer, this has like a slightly darker base than the gold sparkles. I like that it's like gold sparkles on a bronze base because I think that helps add dimension to like what would otherwise be just a flat standard shimmer. I also really enjoy their hollow formula. This shade in the middle is such a standout. I'm kind of glad that it's in the middle of the palette because I just feel like your eyes lock onto it when you see the palette. It's so beautiful. The hollow is so visible. It's so stunning. It's so shifty. It's gorgeous. But this hollow down here, in theory, it should be the same. It's super shifty, it's super sparkly, it's got the hollow, but like I said, it has these like flakes in it, and I don't love that. And I feel like they're not as noticeable when you build the shadow up, but when you sheer it out, or as I was washing the swatch off my arm, I really saw those flakes come out, and I was like, what are those doing in here? Because they're so big. They're like actual flakes. I also do appreciate the variety in depth in the shimmers. You know, you have these two darker shades and you have like some mid-tone shades, but you also have, at least if you're my skin tone, you have 3 options for inner corner shades. You have obviously this one, but you also have this one because it's quite a sheer base and the shifts are very light as well. And then you also have this one over here, which I used in my inner corner today, which like I said, I don't know if that would work if you are lighter, but if you're my skin tone or deeper, I think that it shears out super well and it makes such a beautiful inner corner shade. Formula-wise, all of these shimmers are on the creamy side, not like overly emollient, but not dry by any means. And I feel like I have heard that Adept shimmers can crease on some people, and to be quite honest, I'm not wearing this look for very long today, so I will have to do another look with this palette and wear the shimmers like for, you know, at least 8 hours to really see what they look like. But in general, when I have used shimmers that are of this formula, they don't usually crease on me, so I'm not too worried about it. And even if I get creasing, it's pretty minimal. Like, I just don't have issues with creasing, so I'm not the person to really do the wear tests and try them out. But I think that's it for this video. I will say, after having tried this, I'm definitely more interested in trying Adept's other palettes. I know that their Minka remastered palette, or whatever it's called, like the new version of Minka, it really caught my eye because I love purples and all the purple mattes in that palette looked so beautiful. And now that I know what their shimmers are like, I think I would really like that palette. But let me know in the comments if you know what my tastes are by this point. Which other palettes from Adept do you think I would enjoy? And thank you so much for watching till the end. I feel like I say this all the time, but it really does support this channel so much because, you know, YouTube algorithm stuff. But if you did make it till the end, I would also like to know, since I do consider this to be a spring release, because I mean, it's an emo palette, but with all of those greens and like the muted tones, I just feel like it works really well for spring. So tell me which indie makeup launch that you are most looking forward to this spring. I know Bella Beauty Bar just sneak peeked their Green Goddess palette, and I'm very excited for that one. Thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!